The Knicks should start Immanuel Quickley. The rookie has showed so much promise, especially considering he was almost a second-round pick for the Knicks this year, and I'm pretty excited to see what he could bring down the line in the future for the Knicks. But for this year, the Knicks started off very strong for the most part, but then they dropped 5 straight games, and because of that, they're now toward the bottom of the Eastern Conference after people are possibly thinking, including me, I was a fool, and I said this team could compete for a playoff spot. And granted, still early in the year, they still can. However, there's going to be some things that they probably should change if they want to actually contend this year to get a 7 or 8 seed, because making the playoffs is going to help these young guys, because their team is mostly young players and veterans who have never really led any organization before, to possibly get that, swagger that they could possibly use to help build off of in future seasons. Now, Immanuel Quickley has not shot incredibly efficient. He's shooting 32%. However, what I will say is that he's a rookie, so he's going to have those rough growing pains along the way. So that's typical for any rookie, and he showed so much potential in the past 2 games as he shot the ball particularly well for 19, then 23 points, and he has been a very nice bright spot off their bench. And I definitely think if they insert him into the starting lineup for Elfrid Payton, who has played very poorly the past 5 games, they could start to roll some wins together and get back on track. Now, Elfrid is a nice backup point guard, but he's not exactly the starting point guard you're going to look for in the NBA because he can't space the floor. This year, he's shooting the same 3-point percentage as Immanuel Quickley. They're both shooting 32%. However, what I will say is that those numbers are very deceiving because not only has Immanuel Quickley played in less games, but he's played significantly less minutes, and because of that, his shooting efficiencies have taken a hit because he hasn't really gotten any established rhythm or any actual confidence because he is still young. He hasn't even played 10 games yet in the NBA, but we saw in the preseason him lighted on fire for the most part, doing a variety of things to show the Knicks that he was a very good steal for them to get that late in the draft, and I loved him at Kentucky. And there, he showed the potential to be a great defender. Now, he's 6'3" and he is skinny, but he's got a 6'8" wingspan, and if he puts on some muscle of how quick he is in terms of his actual foot speed and his mobility, he can become a very versatile defender in the NBA. And if you're a Knicks fan, you know Elfrid Payton is not a good defender. Now, he has gotten a little bit better on the Knicks with Tom Thibodeau, because I do think he's helped elevate every player on their roster for the most part defensively. However, Immanuel Quickley has way more defensive potential than Elfrid Payton in this stage of his career. We know what Elfrid Payton is at this point. He's really a good playmaker, but in these last 5 games, he hasn't even been much of that because he's only been getting 3.8 assists, which is very disappointing for a guy who's really starting just so he can get the offense in a flow of things. However, the offense has been ran through Julius Randle, and he is getting almost double the assists per game as a point guard, which is something that you want to strongly consider. Why am I still starting this point guard if he's getting doubled by my power forward in assists per game? Now, the offense, too, is been a little bit stagnant recently because Julius Randle and RJ Barrett have constantly been getting double teamed. And the reason for that is because Elfrid Payton can't space the floor, so when he's playing off ball, his defender will go and double team whoever has the ball, and typically it's Julius Randle in the post, looking to create and kick it out to a shooter. But not only is he getting double teamed by Elfrid Payton, but when he actually does kick it to a wide open Elfrid Payton, he typically misses the shots because he is taking 2 3-point attempts this year, but those 2 3-point attempts per game are wide open looks that you have to take if you're an NBA player, because if you don't, you're going to be out of the league real soon. And by the Knicks starting Immanuel Quickley, they're going to be showing him how much they believe in him, and if he gets that belief by his teammates and his coaches and him, he's going to grow in terms of his confidence, and he's going to play at an all-time high, and he could have a relatively high ceiling and become a foundational piece for the Knicks with some of the other guys they've drafted, like an RJ and a Mitch, who we constantly talk about trying to grow and develop on that team. And then the Knicks could have themselves their starting point guard for the near future, and then they just need to focus on a couple of extra wings who can help elevate him. Now, his 3-point efficiencies are going to go up. He had a stretch of games where he wasn't taking too many, and because of him not taking too many, like I mentioned before, he didn't have any rhythm, and by him not having any rhythm established, he was going to struggle. And he's a rookie, so these things are so typical, and by the end of the year, I do expect him to shoot toward league average or even above it from 3, while also being a good defender. And I think also, too, for the Knicks, not only is this going to help them in the long term developing their possible franchise point guard, but it's going to help them this year too, because if they insert him in the starting lineup, they're going to have relatively reasonable floor spacing. Even with RJ Barrett struggling, he's shooting 21% from 3 this year, which I do think can go up, but he really needs to improve on that. If he doesn't, he's going to have to really develop as a slasher, because you have to be good at one of those if you're going to be a scoring guard who was took as a top 3 pick. And on top of that, Reggie Bullock hasn't shot well for this team either. He's been shooting 32%, which is a little bit disappointing because you'd like to hope he would shoot better. And Julius Randle is this team's best shooter in the starting lineup. And that goes to say a lot, which is why this team is easily one of the worst teams in the league when it comes to three-point shooting. So I do think by starting Immanuel Quickley, when Alec Burks comes back off the bench, he could fill in for Immanuel Quickley as that shooter, and they could still have reasonable floor spacing off their bench while improving it in the starting lineup, because the starting lineup needs more of it right now. And now if Immanuel Quickley is shooting better, I like to assume some of the other guys in the starting lineup are going to start to shoot better as well, because there's going to be less pressure on them to deliver because they have an extra guy in there who can shoot the ball better than their usual starting point guard. And I still think Elfrid Payton can play a ton of minutes on this team, but I think for right now he's best suited as a backup point guard who probably gets 20 minutes a night. And if Immanuel Quickley does struggle, at least you tried him at the starting point guard spot, and you can move Elfrid Payton back to the actual starting spot. And now a lot of people are going to be saying, what about Austin Rivers at point guard? No, he's a wing. He's not exactly the type of playmaker that either Immanuel Quickley or Elfrid Payton are. And while he has shot incredibly well, I think he's been a great spark plug off their bench, because when Alec Burks does come back, the two of them could be two great wing players, and they could keep Elfrid Payton in that lineup. And then if Elfrid Payton's surrounded by two very good wing shooters, he's going to be set up to succeed for their second unit. I think that's how the Knicks can get themselves back on track for the rest of the season. Now, it's going to be a little bit confusing because we don't really know this team's exact identity when some of these other guys like Obi Toppin come back, because then this team's not going to be in the same flow that they were once in when they weren't playing. So that's going to be the biggest factor, I think, personally, that's going to contribute to whether or not they win. I'm assuming they do start Immanuel Quickley within the next few weeks, unless Elfrid Payton starts to pick things up and he starts to play poorly. But either way, they're going to have a lot of questions to answer, especially in terms of coaching and the actual lineups that they're putting out there this season. But you let me know in the comments down below what you think the Knicks should do. Should they start Immanuel Quickley, or should they ride out with Elfrid Payton or somebody else? I think for this team, personally, they could still be a playoff team and surprise a ton of people with a very young lineup. And I do think Elfrid Payton's time as starting point guard in New York is over. But thank you so much for staying to the very end. If you did enjoy, feel free to like or subscribe. I greatly appreciate all the support I've been getting on my channel recently. Some of you guys are really awesome with the actual love in the comments, and if you're one of those people, you're the man, dog. So as always, till next time, peace.